skyline and deep fiery history is the city of incorporation for Alpha Pi Chi National Sorority on January 7, 1963. Alpha Pi Chi National Sorority merged from Alpha Gamma Chi in 1959, which was created by Robert Palmer of Loveland, Colorado, and later Mr. Rupert Rock, as a result of membership's dissatisfaction of taxation without representation. Thus, several brave women, after many meetings and recommendations, decided to use their efforts and energy to establish the sorority of the people, by the people, for the people. Our name, Alpha Pi Chi, translated means sisters, lovers of all, doers of good. Our purpose is to advance a universal sisterhood between all women, dedicated to the principles and ideas of a true democracy, to promote ethical concepts in human relations and a respect of culture of all people, to study and understand current issues on a local, national, and international level as it relates to world peace and progress, to train for leadership and participation as a civic responsibility, to develop the members socially, culturally, and intellectually for a fuller realization of personal success. Our colors, green and white. Our flower, the white carnation. Our motto, lighting the way for learning and living. Our symbol, the torch and the crest. All who worked, recommended, planned, and supported financially and morally the efforts of this sisterhood determined the founders and charter members of Alpha Pi Chi sorority. Today we recognize the late Helen B. Harris and the late E. Gertrude Thompson as two of our founders who have left us with memories of life. Today we share with two other founders, Hazel Carr and Julia M. Stark, the continual challenges of our purpose. There were others. Helen Harris played a key role in the writing of our Constitution and bylaws. Mary Elizabeth Carpenter, instrumental in forming our Northeast region. Dorothy E. Avent, first to hold the position of staff assistant. Mrs. Min Schreier, National Field President, who installed our first officers of the Midwest region. Ruth Henderson wrote our first history booklet. Our ritual was composed, written, and published by our sorority, resulting from a creativity contest in 1963. Pearline Wilson wrote our opening and closing prayer. Catherine Frazier wrote our Code of Ethics. Alma Thomas wrote the Alpha Pi Chi Pledge. Jo Celeste Holt wrote our Alpha Pi Chi song. And Peggy Tanksley wrote our closing song. Our first national officers were Julia Stark, President, Chicago, Illinois. E. Gertrude Thompson, First Vice President, Atlanta, Georgia. Hazel Carr, Second Vice President, St. Louis, Missouri. Lula Brown, Recording Secretary, Charlotte, North Carolina. Ruth Lewis, Correspondent Secretary, Kansas City, Kansas. Ordile Stedman, Treasurer, Washington, D.C. Supporting our goals and purposes, Alpha Pi Chi sorority has been active with many and supporting of many national organizations. Since 1981, Alpha Pi Chi has a life membership with the NAACP. We supported Lee Phillips of the Lee Phillips Show, Toys for Tots. We continue to volunteer our services to Channel 11 WTTW Educational Television. We gave a substantial financial contribution to the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta, Georgia for social change. We contributed to the John F. Kennedy Foundation for mental retardation in Washington, D.C. In Plano, Texas, we adopted a highway for litter control. We provide numerous scholarships for students in various fields. Let us talk to two of our founders who are still with us today.
I'm Myrtle Gunn, President of the Midwest region of Alpha Pi Chi National Sorority Incorporated. I'm very, very excited to be a part of this presentation of the history of our sorority.
Hello, I'm Ruth Conwell, First Vice President of Alpha Pi Chi National Sorority Midwest region. I'm sitting here today with an interview with one of our founders, Soror Hazel Carr. Hello, Hazel.
Hi.
Hazel, just tell us a little bit about how Alpha Pi Chi got started. What year and what state were you in?
We originally went from Boulder, Colorado. We were started, as far as we were concerned, it was supposed to be a business and professional organization, service oriented. Mr. Rock really didn't care what you did. All he wanted you to do is collect dues and send it to him.
Okay.
When we didn't receive any kind of information, then we investigated Mr. Rock. I investigated Alpha Gamma Chi through the. He didn't have any kind of corporation papers. We went to the corporation board in Boulder and found out that Mr. Rock had let the corporation papers drop. And so in Terre Haute, when we had our next meeting, we brought all the information that we had to the chapters, and the chapters at that time voted to withdraw all funds, all dues from Alpha Gamma Chi until such time that we could decide to form a new organization.
Okay.
And this was to be decided at the following meeting, which was in 1950, around 58.
I see.
We met in 1958 in Kansas City, Missouri. Mr. Rock attended because he hadn't received any money for the past year. In the meantime, I got in touch with Gertrude Thompson, who was president of the Southeast region.
Okay.
And she was in agreement with what we had, what we had done. And so she said the Southeast region would go right along with us, and whatever we decided, they would do it. When we met in June, Mr. Rock came, and we didn't know what was going to happen because we were really inexperienced.
Yes.
And it was kind of a funny kind of situation. We had told one of the ladies there now, if who was a property owner, that if we got put in jail, that they were supposed to get us out because we knew Mr. Rock was coming, and he had told us that if we tried to meet in the name of Alpha Gamma Chi, he was going to have us arrested. And that's a whole lot of things that, being inexperienced, you didn't know what was going to happen. He did come, but we also advised our officers that he was not to be given any money and that he was not to be involved in the registration at all. When he came, they came and got me, and I brought him into the meeting. And I remember we were doing our ritual, and he, stood there, had no idea what the ritual was, anything about it.
So at that time you were president?
I was president of Alpha Gamma Chi.
I see.
Midwest region.
Okay.
So anyway, at that meeting, we voted to withdraw from Alpha Gamma Chi and form a new organization.
Okay.
Now, at that point, it didn't have a name.
I see.
We voted to form a new organization, and that a representative from our region would meet at a given date with the officers of the Southeast region.
Okay. So what year was this now? Was this?
About 58 or 59.
Okay. Okay.
When we had that meeting in Chicago.
I see.
And the first board meeting that was held in Chicago at one of our officers, Bradford's house.
Okay.
And so at that time, then that's when they had formed the offices. Judy was elected president of the Gertrude Thompson from the Southeast was elected first vice president. I was elected second vice president. Now we only had 2 vice presidents because there were only 2 regions.
So are you telling me then that these officers are the first officers of the new organization? Alpha Pi Chi National Sorority?
That's right.
Okay.
Now, Elizabeth Carpenter was in attendance from Washington, D.C. because she was interested, but she only had 1 chapter, and there has to be at least 3 or 4 chapters before we can think in terms of a region. So she was invited to come with the idea that she eventually would start the 3rd region. And when she got enough chapters, then she was made 3rd vice president and Northeast region.
Okay. So all of these new ladies then were African Americans. All the new. Okay.
The white ladies didn't stay.
I see.
Once they got in and found out that it was an interracial thing, and at that time, it wasn't a big thing as much as it is now. So once they were initiated, and see, they got the money in front. Your initiation fee. So these women just never did return. So we never did see any more of them.
So now you've kind of given me an idea of how the Northeast region became, and it was formed in the Midwest region. How did you get to the South?
It wasn't formed in the Midwest. I mean, it was just.
How you were meeting in the Midwest.
But I mean, it was the first region that was formed under the new organization.
Right.
Now, the Southeast region was already in existence.
Okay.
And so when I said that Gertrude Thompson was the president of that particular region, okay?
Okay.
So let me see. We had Ruth Lewis from St. Louis was made the corresponding secretary, and we had Mildred Martin, who now lives in Alabama, was treasurer, and there was a lady from Alabama that was corresponding secretary. Now all of this changed because what happened when we had our second meeting. Now we organized and we talked about what we wanted to do and that type of thing.
Okay. So then once you did this in Chicago, right? Or was it Chicago?
This was done in Chicago.
Chicago. When did you actually say you had become a group? When did you actually?
We had about 2 or 3 meetings.
Okay.
And then incorporation papers were filed in Chicago.
Okay.
And you had to have a registered agent to do that. So we filed the incorporation papers. Julia lived there, so she was the registered agent.
Okay.
And we still have a registered agent in Chicago. Merle Garden is our registered agent. But we organized, we got chartered, and January 7th was the date that was on our charter. And so this is why we said we were chartered January 7th, 1963.
Okay. You list 4 women as the founders. Can you give me those women's names?
Julia Washington Starr, E. Gertrude Thompson, Hazel Carr, and Helen Blake Harris.
Okay.
Helen Blake Harris.
And how do you differ the founders and the charter members? How many charter members did you have? Would the founders be considered part of the charter too?
Well, the charter was done differently. At the meeting of this group that I told, this first executive board, the executive board decided on who was going to be the charter members, and the decision was that the charter members would be the presidents, people who were presidents when the new organization was formed. So the president of the Southeast at that time was Gertrude Thompson. The president of Midwest was Hazel Carr. Julia Washington was past president, but she was there, and so she was president because she was just a past president, and she was just a part of the Midwest, and it just made her a founder.
Okay.
And Helen Blake Harris was what did they call him at that time? Sponsor of that chapter, of Julia's chapter, and very knowledgeable about sororities and that type of thing, and very useful and helpful to us because in it none of none of us had any experience as to what was the best way to go about doing this. So this is why we had these 4 people.
Okay, how did you come up with the name Alpha Pi Chi?
Well, Mrs. Harris went to a professor at Chicago University and asked him for, suggestions for a Greek name and something that had meaning. So he gave her quite a few names with the Greek names, with the definitions, with the meanings. So it was decided that we use Alpha Pi Chi, which meant sisters, lovers of all, doers of good.
And that was what the whole body decided, or just?
It was decided by the executive board.
Executive board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the colors, how did you come up with all this? The executive board kind of
came up with the colors.
Yes.
There was a lot of discussion about colors, but it was decided that green and white would be the better color.
Okay, I mean, how did you just come up with green and white? It's a beautiful, beautiful concept, but the green and white is so beautiful. How did you just decide that? Because of
I don't know. We were just sitting around and decided that would be the color.
Yeah, and the symbol. You have the symbol.
The symbol was really something that a lot of consideration was given to because it was going to be the organ of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So it was decided that the torch would be our symbol, and that our motto would be lighting the way for learning and living. So that this light then would be the light from the torch, would be lighting the way, and almost everyone had a handmade torch. Mrs. Ruth Lewis had torches made, almost everyone had torches. You probably got some of the old torches with the fingers on them, with the hands on them. And that's what happened there.
Well, when reading the history too, it also stated that the first chapter on campus was started in 1973. Which college was that?
That chapter was down south, but in truth, we have never had a college chapter, campus-based chapter, because we are not an academic organization, and because the dean there will now allow you to have a sorority unless it's oriented toward a degree. And since our Constitution said that that was not one of our requirements. It didn't say that you could have a degree, but it wasn't a requirement. And also the Pan Atlantic Council specifically states even now that unless you have a college degree, your organization has a college degree. I mean, people have degrees that they cannot be members of the Pan Atlantic Council. So at no time have we been ever. Now, we had some people who went to the college campuses, Mrs. Tucker, who worked on a college campus from down south in Alabama, worked on the campus. And so she had some girls and organized chapters there. So they were members of Alpha Gamma Chi. Alpha Pi Chi, the name that we had chosen. Right. They were members of Alpha Pi Chi, and she had a chapter. But basically, and they met at her house on campus, that she lived on campus or in the building somewhere. But you can't say in truth that they were truly members of that college.
Okay, very good. What are some of the methods that you used to expand, to get more chapters? Did you, how did you reach out to the different states to get, were they already, you said they were already established, but did you use some other method to try to get other chapters in other states?
Well, when we were organized as Alpha Gamma,
right.
Now, after we were given the name, I chose the name of Alpha Pi Chi. Remember now, we already had a base.
Okay.
And Midwest took somewhere between 12 and 15, around 12 chapters. I don't remember the exact amount of people. The Southeast region had 20-some chapters. So those chapters were transferred, became a part of the new organization. Now, we're doing the same thing then that we do now. Your cousin, your friend, your relative. And we just organize chapters that way. So as you knew people, you organize chapters. And we have, actually in Midwest, we have never gained the chapters. We don't have as many chapters now as we had when we were organized, because we had 3 chapters in Kansas City, Missouri. We had a chapter in Kansas City, Kansas. We had 3 chapters in Memphis, Tennessee.
Going back a little bit, when you said that you used a professor to get your name, the Alpha Pi Chi National Sorority, did you use the same professor to get the names of the different chapters? How did you or did you just pick Greek letters that were never used?
No, we had.
How did you do that?
We had a list.
Okay.
There was a list of names, and you started with Alpha, and that was done at the national office. So every chapter was given a name, and we had a gigantic pledging or drilling ceremony at the 1964 convention. And so Alpha, so they just went down the line with Alpha here, Beta here, and next time, you know, it's Alpha, and then Alpha, Beta, on down the line until you ran out of that group. And then you went to Beta to, from Beta, Alpha, you know, like that. And that's how the names are chosen. That's the Stills thing, the way it's chosen.
Okay. Since all these women were business and professional women, how did you have time to do cultural, political, and social events in this organization? And in that process, what emphasis did these events place on the sorority? I mean, what was your emphasis behind having these events and doing these events? You know, like, what is the real purpose of Alpha Pi Chi?
Well, our real purpose is really service and volunteer service.
Okay.
But we are a service organization. And most chapters had volunteer services or regular, some kind of service project. Even though there's been a lot of talk about a lot of cultural activities, I don't really believe that we can say in truth that we have done a whole lot of things as far as cultural arts concerned. I mean, we have done things at the opera, or we know about the museum, or something like that. But when you say have a full program, we really haven't done that. But we have done a lot in education.
Okay.
And I remember the first scholarship that we had, we raised $5,000, and it was given as a scholarship to one of the schools. That was to me, this was my crowning period, because we were young, you know, new. We had never given a whole lot of money, which is still not a whole lot of money, but we did contribute this in some to the school. Now we continue to do that, and each region was given the right, when the convention met in their city, in their region, to choose a school. And then check was given to that, and the box of knowledge, the money, that's when the box of knowledge was set up. And this money originally was to be given $1 a day, and it was to be given to a school. Later it was decided that we should give it to the student.
Do you remember the year the box of knowledge was set up?
I don't think.
Okay. What are some of the significant changes that you have seen in the sorority since its inception in January 1963?
Oh, they have been tremendous. Let me see. Let's start thinking about some of them. Well, although we have learned a lot about ourselves, we have a respect for women. We have a respect for black women. Certainly we have emphasized leadership, and we've encouraged our women to feel good about themselves, to not to be afraid to take leadership roles, to be a part of the community. And for the organization to flourish, it must be, the members of the organization must be a part, an integral part of the community in which it has lived. I've seen people who we couldn't get to say a word. We have a Soror in St. Louis now who is active, and I can remember so well that she wouldn't say A, you know, and now you can't stop them talking. So I think it has done a lot in that respect. I think that the fellowship that we have gained from that. Now, we've had our ups and downs, and I don't think any group of women are always going to agree, but I don't think there has ever been a real kind of disagreement that would cause for a real interruption of what we were actually doing in the organization. we have grown in chapters. We have not grown in chapters, but we have, although we have moved from one area to the other. So maybe while we lost a chapter in Terre Haute where we voted to withdraw, but we have chapters now in Gary, and I find that the people that joined at first were more, they were more business people, but not people who were economically prosperous.
Okay.
And I find now that we have more educated women, more college degree women, more college graduated women in this organization. So that has meant a lot. And it has attracted those in spite of the fact that they could have gone into an academic organization.
I'd like to just get your input on where you would like to see, what would you really like to see in this organization? I mean, I know this is part of your heart and you've been here a long time. Just give me a little idea of what you would like to see.
I would like to see it grow. I would like to see the membership get back to, we started out when we transferred all the monies from all the different cities. We had like 500 members. We started out around 400 or 500 members within the organization. So we can say that, I'm not saying this exact, but we can say that we started out with around 400 or 500 members as Alpha Pi Chi sorority. And today, we have 629 members. So then you wonder what happened in the interim. Now, we got up, when I was national president, we had gotten up as high as $995, 995 members. And but our emphasis at that point was to go to the chapters. And I believe that the individual is the grassroots of the organization. And if we don't push that chapter member, that one member, you aren't going anywhere. Because when you discourage that Soror, then you're going to lose a chapter. And when you lose a chapter, you've lost everything. But for some reason, that the emphasis has got to be on national office, regional office, electing a whole lot of people a part of the national office. The national office has members. We have as many people who are appointed to the national office as we have elected officers. And I don't really think that does the best for the organization. And I don't think that we've always made the decision, not purposely, but we have made the kinds of decisions that will help us to grow. Anytime that you're losing more members than you're gaining, then somewhere along the line that we have to do. But I really believe that it starts in the chapters. And we just don't have the knowledge, and we don't have that thing that says, I'm just glad I'm a member of Alpha Pi Chi. And I look forward to going to the meeting. But we are so involved in raising money to meet our quotas or pay our dues that we lose sight of going to the meeting. And we don't have a program. We don't have the kind of program that I feel like we need to have. So you go to the meeting and you can say, well, I know that they're going to have talk about fundraising, and they're going to have a good meal, and you sit around and talk for a little while and you run off and leave. But at no time can you actually know that we're going to have a program and we're going to discuss such and such a thing. And so I think it's important in all regions that we have a program. I used to insist that every chapter, every region must have a program for the chapter. I'm not talking about the project that goes out and talks about risk, children for risk. That's fine. But that's for those people out there on the street. But we need something that you can sit down and we can talk about change, and I can say, what is your idea about change, and what is your idea about change, and what is her idea about change. And we can interchange ideas until a point that we come together in our thinking. And we have shared thoughts, shared memories, and shared fellowship. And until we get to that point, I think we're in trouble.
Here we're sitting here in the Northeast region now, and we've just witnessed some great workshops. And you presented one of those workshops, and you presented us definitions for the seal. Can you go briefly over the seal real quickly?
The crest?
The crest. I'm sorry. The crest.
Okay.
Yes, the crest.
The crest was organized in the 80s because we had the flag with the carnation and the torch. We felt that there should be something that identified us as Alpha Pi Chi. So, and most organizations have some kind of crest. So we organized the crest, and the crest contains all the symbols of Alpha Pi Chi. It has the carnation, which is our national flower. It has the torch. It has 4 carnations, which represents the four founders. It has the Greek letters. It has the laurel wreaths that represents growth. So everything that has anything at all to do with Alpha Pi Chi, as far as symbols are concerned, made up this crest.
Hazel, it's been a very, very interesting and a pleasure with this interview with you. And I love you, and I want you to know that. And you're going to be leaving a legacy with us, because we're going to use this every chance we get to educate the young people who are coming into this organization. And I want you to know that, okay?
Well, there's so much more about us that we got to learn, but thanks for inviting me.
Okay. Let me get this handshake here.
Hello, Julia Stark. It is a pleasure to be sitting here with you this evening to share some of your experiences with the history of Alpha Pi Chi sorority. Give me a briefing of some of your experiences of its beginnings.
Well, Alpha Pi Chi Sorority Incorporated is a non-profit organization of women dedicated to the principles of our motto, which is lighting the way for learning and living. And of course, we have a long history, and we're very proud of that history. So we'll be happy to talk with any of you who would like to know more about how we got started and what it's all about.
I remember reading some of the history, and I remember in gatherings with the sorority at different events, they used the word conclave. Explain conclave and what that actually meant at that time.
Well, actually, conclave is a term that's used occasionally for national convention. It's a group of women or a group of people who have a central goal or mission. And so we were calling it conclave in the early days. We don't hear that quite as much now. We say more or less our national convention or our regional convention or whatever. But that's really what the term actually means. Are you interested in where our first convention was held?
Sure I am. I wanted to know where it was held, when it was held, and what state.
Well, the first national convention was held here in Chicago, the seat of our incorporation. And it was held at the Sherman House Hotel at 32 West Randolph. And that was in 1964. We were incorporated in 1963, but our first convention was a year later, which was 1964. And we found that we had to file annually with the state of Illinois because we are a nonprofit organization. At that time, we did not have all of our chapters chartered, but as a national organization, we were.
Okay. Also, back in the 70s, I noticed that some of our functions was sponsored by influential women who could help us in meeting some of other influential women. Who were some of those women?
Well, we were very proud of the fact that we did have many influential women. First of all, in organizing this sorority, we used persons who could help us really set our constitution and bylaws in order. And so one lady that was very, very interested in younger women and what they were doing and their activities, obtained a woman named Nell Searle, who was an employee at the University of Chicago. Nell Searle, in turn, interested a man who was a professor, Benedict Enerson, who was head of the Department of Classical Languages and Literature at the University of Chicago. And he got our name together because in talking with us, he wanted to know what were our goals. And so that's how we got the name, meaning sisters, lovers of all, doers of good. That is the basic interpretation of Alpha Pi Chi sorority. And he went into the Greek alphabet and selected names that meant just that for us. And we were happy to have him work with us.
Okay. Also, I noticed that there were women like Bernadine C. Washington, Muriel Farmer, Margaret Stewart Joyner, and Margaret Weyhauser, and Christy Hefner. Those are some of the women I noticed in pictures that were influential with the forming and the sponsoring of some of your events. Can you elaborate on some of those women?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Attorney Muriel Farmer was a very, very talented woman and highly recognized in Illinois. She herself was not only an attorney, but she aspired also to judgeship. But we did have Judge Edith Sampson, who was among the first black women judges in the state of Illinois. We now have, as you know, State Senator Margaret Smith, and then we had several others. We had Mrs. Marguerite Wenhauser, who helped us to fashion the organization and get it in the structure that it should be for an organization with chapters all over, not just here in the Midwest, but those who were in the Southeast, the Northeast, and other places. So she was a great help to us, and I hope that we were able to find some pictures with Marguerite. She was a very brilliant woman, had a very big position in Washington, D.C., and so we had some of the best.
Okay. What happened to that concept of sponsoring? Were they sponsoring chapters or just events? And do you think that is a concept that we could still use today?
Well, we somewhere along the way decided that a chapter might have a sponsor, and it was supposed to be a person who was influential in the community, who could help us to become better known, and so that we could reach out to young women and some of those who were more accomplished as well to work with us. And so I would say that we really had a lot of work to do to put the organization together in the early days. It wasn't easy, and we tried to use persons who were really in position to help us grow and develop.
And they didn't have to be a member. They could just be
we consider them really honorary members.
Okay. I understand that, speaking on some of the things that we do as an organization, I understand that Nancy Connie Smith of your present chapter, Delta Zeta, is a regular supporter of and a volunteer of the Pacific Garden Mission that feeds the hungry and houses the homeless. What do you say about motivating and the drive that influence others to do some of the same things?
Well, Nancy Constance Smith is a very, very unusual person. She has worked with Pacific Garden Mission, as you named, the Salvation Army, the Christian Industrial League. She inspires us to get together and work on these kinds of things that would help the disadvantaged and things of that sort. And of course, she was able to do it both financially and from just volunteering her services, going down, working to sit and serve as a hostess or as a telephone operator and things of that sort. And so we're very proud of the fact that Connie is that type of individual. And She feels that there's so much that retirees could do. Women who are no longer working from 9 to 5 every day, but women who might have time on their hands and would be willing to contribute something to help others where it's needed.
Okay. In this 21st century, okay, thinking about what you felt was good about this organization when it first started in comparison to now, what do you see and feel about the organization from that time to now?
Well, I feel that we really have a goal and a mission to accomplish. We've done a lot, and we're all very proud of what we've been able to do, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And so we're thinking in terms of bringing in more active, younger women, and as well as the more mature women, and asking them to take on projects that will help to advance womanhood, sisterhood, and all the things that we're about. And there are some who feel that we should take in men. I don't mention this often, but some of our sorors felt that men have made a great contribution to us. We did have a Dr. Joe Douglas. His name may not be too familiar to you, but he was head of Secretary of State of the United States and was a speaker at one of our Northeast regional meetings many, many years ago in the early years. And then we've had others who were mayors and who were head of national committees and so forth. And that's the kind of thing that develops growth.
Okay, I remember seeing a picture of you with the late Mayor Harold Washington.
Harold Washington.
Who was the late mayor of the city of Chicago. What was the occasion of that?
Well, we decided that we wanted to give a donation or a contribution to Operation Push and a couple of other organizations that Mayor Washington was interested in, and he gave his support to. And so we happened to catch up with him once when we were guests at Operation Push. And we said, come on, you've got to have a picture made with us because we're promoting your projects and the things that you stand for. And he was very pleased and always very accommodating. And so we feel that some of those things that he was all about, helping young people to get them involved in politics, to help them understand that there's a lot of community work out there to be done. And so he was really a very, very good person for us to know about, and we appreciate the help and assistance that he gave us.
In keeping with our goals and our purpose, I recognize that you gave a lot of contributions, that we a lifetime member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I want to know about the contribution you made to the Martin Luther King Center with the pictures that I saw of you and Coretta Scott. Tell me a little bit about that event.
Yes, we felt that we wanted to make a contribution to someone as great as Dr. Martin Luther King. So when we were holding a meeting in Atlanta with our Southeast region, we went to this house where he was born or he lived, and we invited Coretta Scott King to come to our convention. It was being held in Detroit, Michigan that year. She came, we gave her a sizable donation, we felt, $6,000, and we also gave the NAACP. Ben Hooks was supposed to come and be our speaker, and due to some mix-up in his schedule, he couldn't make it. But we did send that donation nevertheless because we felt that it was our mission as an organization to help these that have paved the way for so much of our success as not only an organization but as individuals, as a race, and as a nation. And so that was really behind our doing what we did for Coretta Scott King And I understand that they have built quite a monument there in Atlanta. I hope that when we go, we'll be able to go over and see it. It's not just the little house that King was born in that was there when we went the first time.
Okay.
So it would be nice for us to remember that. And when we have a meeting in Atlanta again, ask our president to arrange for us to have a tour through that home.
I know we've touched on this a little bit, but in this effort that we're documenting the history and trying to include the purpose and the goals, what would you like to say to the membership to inspire new Piettes and to motivate us, all of the members?
Well, I'd like to say that we have to first think about our goals. What are our goals? And we have to give some thought to inviting in and promoting the very young women. And college campuses usually have activities for young women, but sometimes once they get beyond that college level, they're not actively involved in things that we would undertake. So we're trying to reach out to a certain level of young women and get them involved in doing community work. There's so much that you can really do, service projects that you can sponsor. And, we feel that our organization is on the verge of becoming interracial. It should be. And we can invite persons of other races and nationality backgrounds to come in and work with us and be involved with Alpha Pi Chi. And so that was discussed at some of our meetings, and we should pursue it. I hope that our membership will do that.
Why don't you give us a closing comment so that whatever you feel like you would like to say to the organization?
Well, I say, what does the future hold for us as an organization? I can remember when we had upwards of 1,200 members, and I realize that now our membership is down. But it can go up again. And in order for us to do this, we must reach out more to young women and inspire them to want to belong to an organization like this. We may have to change our rules a little bit because we've got to put a little fun and socializing in it, possibly more than we have in the past. Everything must have a balance, it is my feeling. And so we must serve also as role models. We should be mature, but yet well-seasoned women. And so I would say in order for us to move ahead and progress, we must begin to help others to develop their skills and their knowledge and do whatever we can do to really promote the basics of Alpha Pi Chi. We have a torch, and I think we ought to really, the torch is a symbol of light and life and living. That's what the idea was when it was promoted as our symbol. And I feel that we ought to really look forward to carrying that torch and lighting the way for living and learning, just as our motto says. I'd like to close with this statement that was on the first, I believe, speech that we had in one of our first conventions, and I would like to just say that it goes like this. History is the witness of the times. Our history is so important to us. The torch of truth, the life of memory, the teacher of life, and the messenger of antiquity, which means only style and appearance and quality and greatness, is all we're talking about. This was written by Cicero back in 18 BC, but I feel that it has a place in our society now. And if we will listen to what Cicero was trying to tell the people then, history is so important. So we ought to be ready to move forward in Alpha Pi Chi.
Thank you so much, Julia. I could hear your heart into that, and I hope that it spreads out to everyone else who's listening or who sees you.
Well,
thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.